Hey everyone, this is First Warn Storm Team Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich. A lot of scuttlebutt or social media talk about this potential winter storm next week. And I should emphasize way ahead of time, it is so far out there. It's 6 to 7 days. In some cases, the new models are showing it a little bit quicker, but that's still pretty far out there. And it's a very rare event, something we would call an extreme outlier. So I'm very skeptical at this point. I just do not feel comfortable forecasting any specifics, but I've seen enough that I'm at least going to talk about the potential. I think the interesting thing is not so much to focus on, hey, could it snow? Could we get accumulation? It really is the pattern that is going to develop late next week that is very winter-like and is going to be more interesting to me than actually whether it snows or not. We're going to get right into what's going on with this system. So let me show you what's going on. What you're looking at here is the GFS model. The great thing about the GFS, and there are some good things about it, is that it's a global model. So you can start tracking things globally. And what you're looking at here, these lines are what we call 500 millibars, or kind of the mid levels of the atmosphere, as well as the vorticity, which are the colors below those lines. So we're just going to go out into the future here, and let's go into the weekend. You first start to see there's a lot of activity in the North Pacific. We've had a lot of recurving typhoons out there, big storms going into parts of Alaska, and this pattern is starting to really amplify the polar jet stream. And the polar jet stream typically doesn't really get active down here in the United States until late December, January. Occasionally it happens earlier, but this is kind of interesting to see the jet get really active this time of year. So we'll go into, this is Monday morning at 7 a.m. And the first thing you notice is we've got a bunch of big storms out here in the northern Pacific and eastern Pacific, but we've got this big piece of the polar vortex dropping south out of Canada. And this trough really starts to develop and move down into the United States, especially late Monday into Tuesday. And you start to see this huge monster ridge develop out west, which buckles up into Canada. And this ends up forcing down some Arctic air into eastern Canada and eventually down here into the United States. So this is going to be Monday night. We'll go into Tuesday morning, and all of a sudden you see the monster trough start to develop and the nice wave moving down into that trough. So we'll go out a little bit further. You can see our developing system right here. Look at this nice negative or positive tilt to this trough initially, and it's going to swing down here into the southeast and start to tilt negatively, which means it starts to tilt backwards. And you can see it start to cut off almost a 500 millibar low. And this is really deep because look at where this flow is coming from. It's coming from way up here in northern Canada over Hudson Bay and then diving down here into the southeastern US. So this is a pretty impressive trough any time of year, let alone here in the middle. We're talking the middle of November, not really even the end. And then you see how this thing kind of spins up and goes off the coast and really starts to crank up. Now we're going to back this up a little bit, and I'm going to turn off some of the overlays here, and we're going to switch to snowfall because that's the thing that we're looking at here. So we'll flip over to our snowfall on the GFS, and again, this is snowfall. So you're looking at this thing developing. This is a Tuesday morning. We've got snow moving down into the Ohio Valley, and then watch as that thing develops. By the time we get into Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, which is much earlier than the previous runs of the model, and you see what happens here over the Carolinas. Just to give you an idea, the scale is here on the left. These darker shades of blue are between 2 and 3 inches. The blue that shows up here in southwestern Virginia is about 4 inches, and then up towards Snowshoe, that's about 5 inches. But for Charlotte and areas into South Carolina, this is about a half an inch to an inch of snow, probably most of it melting on contact with the ground because it's so warm, but it does show some snow. And the one thing you notice is the orientation of this looks like a wedge. And that's the one caveat I have to this whole setup. It doesn't look like a good snow setup. So when you look at the models, this is another view of the same model you just saw, and you'll see that kind of wedge orientation to what's going on here. You see the orientation of the snowfall here. It's kind of moving down along a wedge area, and typically we don't get a lot of big snows with a wedge set up like that. So that makes me kind of not buying into the snowfall thing. I would almost lean towards an icy situation, which is much more probable this early in the season. This is the European model from last night, and it was ridiculous. I mean, this is a ridiculous storm when you look at these totals up here in Eastern Virginia, the Delmarva. I don't think that's going to happen, but it's on the same kind of trend as the GFS. So that's why you got to kind of look at it a little bit. As we look at how this thing develops on the surface, you can see the temperatures here, the isobars, as well as the precipitation. Watch the Arctic high. To me, this is probably the thing that pops out the most to me. Right there, that's almost a 1050 Arctic high moving down into the northern plains. So certainly some cold air. But the other thing meteorologically that's kind of goofy about this is a northern stream piece of energy. You really never get the Gulf and southern stream to sync up until this thing gets to the coast, which it doesn't make a whole lot of sense right now. I actually think with the center of the high back to the west and some undercutting of this cold air, I wouldn't be shocked to see sleet or freezing rain almost, but the snow amounts in the Carolinas seem a little ridiculous at this point. And just to put this into perspective, I posted this earlier. This is all the snow, accumulating snow, more than a trace, because the earliest snow ever in Charlotte was a trace on Halloween in like the 1800s. But accumulating snow means a tenth of an inch or higher. And you can see only 7 times in 135 years have we had measurable snow in the month of November. And it did happen not too long ago, year 2000. We had 2.5 inches, but you can see it's just one of those events that doesn't happen very often. But again, looking at the model data, this is a look at the model data for Charlotte. You can see it's putting out a couple inches of snow, but again, a lot of melting and compacting. We're probably talking an inch top. And then you look at the soundings. This is another look at the same kind of thing. When you're looking from right to left here, you can see early Wednesday morning into Wednesday afternoon, a little bit of snow. And again, if it happen, this is going to happen at night. It's not going to snow during the day in November. It's just not going to happen. It's going to be too warm. So this is just something I'm kind of looking at right now. I'm not buying it completely, but I did want to talk about it. Once we get to the weekend, Saturday, Sunday, I think we're going to have a good idea whether this is going to happen. The models have been flipping around. Yesterday, they were blowing it up over Washington. Yesterday afternoon, it was over West Virginia. Last night, it was over Eastern Virginia. Now we're getting snow down in the Carolinas. So the model's all over the place. And the thing you worry about in model situations, even though this is a global model, as I talked about, this storm system is actually even in the United States yet. So we're not sampling it really well with some of our upper air stations and some of the surface observations. So the modeling probably isn't perfect right now, but it's something to watch. Stay tuned. It's early on. I'm not forecasting snow right now. I just know there's going to be a ton of hype on this storm. And this far out, it's a little ridiculous in my opinion. We just aren't that good at forecasting 6 or 7 days into the future, at least specific. You got to remember, snow is really hard to get in this part of the country. You're talking 1/10 of a degree at certain altitudes. It could be the difference between a cold rain and a snow. That's hard to do 24 hours ahead of time, let alone 6 or 7 days. So it's fun to talk about. I won't pull the snow meter out yet, but again, stay tuned online, on air. I'll have you covered. You know how I am about winter events. I'm a big snow lover like most people, but I like being right more than I like snow. So we got to get this right, and I'm going to kind of hang back a little bit, and we're going to wait and see how this goes through the weekend. We've got a lot of time to watch it, but I'll just put it out there so people can see and get it from a perspective where I just call it like I see it instead of a lot of the hype that you're going to see online. I hope you have a great day. I'll talk a little bit about this maybe today on air. Probably not going to do too much. We'll be talking about the super typhoon heading towards the Philippines, as well as the colder air moving in for our weekend, cold and dry, coming up today at 4, 5, and 6 on NBC Charlotte. I'll see you then.